Hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel. You might have seen a few of my videos and wonder, okay, Gelsey, what are you all about? What's your story? Well, I'm about to tell you. With over 17 years of professional experience in the entertainment world, I have done almost everything a live performer can, from theme parks to cruise ships to national tours to flying high with Cirque du Soleil. You name it, I've probably done it. So I wanted to share with you my personal journey through this crazy world we call showbiz. So buckle up and get ready for my personal journey. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed, click that too so you don't miss any of my fresh new content about the entertainment world. And we begin with the tale of Gelsey Laurie. If you haven't put two and two together already, well, I was born into this world dancing. I was named after professional ballerina Gelsey Kirkland. She was the superstar of New York City Ballet in the 70s, so big shoes to follow, yeah. Aside from that, my mom owns a dance studio, so I literally was born into this world dancing. Only weeks before I was born, my mom was on stage with me in her belly. Yeah, talk about destined. My first time on stage, I barely turned 3 years old, and I was tap dancing away, and oh my gosh, addicted. I was addicted. I loved it. So I kept dancing ballet, jazz, and tap in my mom's studio, but when I was about 8 years old, I realized I got some bigger things in sight. The local ballet school in my city had the Nutcracker production put on every year. I'd already done about 4 years of that production, but I wanted the main star of Clara. And I realized only the girls that go to their school get that role. So I asked my mom to enroll me in that ballet school, and thus started my ballet journey. Lord help me. I did get Clara that year in the Nutcracker. Yeah, dreams come true. Through my early preteen and teen years, I was an intense bunhead. I'm talking point shoes 20 hours a week, all day on Saturday. I did 8 years of the Nutcracker, 2 years of the production of Cinderella, 1 year of Swan Lake. I mean, my feet bled a lot. Gross. I also spent a summer in Philadelphia at the Rock School of Ballet. When you're a ballerina, every summer you audition for summer intensive programs with big ballet companies. And you either get in or don't. And the ones you do get into, you get to go for 4 to 6 weeks away from home and train with the professionals day in and day out. I was 12 years old when I went, and oh my, I learned a lot. Once I started getting into my teen years though, I realized as much as I loved ballet, it wasn't the career that I was gonna go down. I was never destined to be in the back of a line just standing, waving a rose back and forth while some prima got the spotlight. As if. No, I just had way too much personality. So in high school, I joined our competitive dance competition. That's really when my jazz skills kind of came back and I honed in on a lot of jazz technique. I also started doing theater in school, and so I did a lot of the musicals, getting the lead in a few of them, which brought out that musical theater side of me, and I was like, oh, I like this. I get to be a character, which I've never stopped being. But now I did grow up in Southern California, so it was only natural that one of my dream jobs as a kid was performing at Disneyland. I grew up seeing these amazing magical performers in front of me, so when I was 16, I went to one of their auditions, lined up with hundreds of other girls, and went in about, 50 at a time, learned a combo, and we just got cut more and more down. 2 weeks later, I got the phone call that I got the job. My first professional job was dancing at Disneyland in that parade. I was in Parade of Dreams as an animal. That was the summer that I turned 17, so I was the youngest one there, and oh man, did I learn a lot and how to rise up. During my time at Disneyland, I had the pleasure of being in multiple different parades, Parade of Dreams, the Electrical Light Parade, and getting to open and create a brand new parade, which that was such an experience in itself. I mean, these were overnight rehearsals for 2 weeks where we're doing full parades in the street at 2, 3 in the morning so we could rehearse with no guests in the park. My clock-in time around parades was, I want to say 2 p.m. For a while, I was, sleeping until 11, chilling, then going to work. But then I realized I wanted more. I'd grown up seeing Cirque du Soleil shows, and when I was 15 years old, I saw this brand new show they had called The Beatles Love. I was enamored. So much so that the next year for my Sweet 16, when my mom asked me what I wanted to do, I said go back to Vegas and sit front row at the Beatles Love show. It inspired me more than any other performance I had seen. I naturally had to start getting in the air. I looked up the closest circus school to me, which was LA from Orange County. So about 2 to 3 times a week, I would wake up early, drive out to LA, take a 2-hour class, drive back, and then go do 2 parades. And that lit something inside of me. I then found a smaller, more family-owned circus school, and I went every single day for a private. I worked so hard, and oh my gosh, every blister on my hand, burn on my leg, I loved it. That same company is the company that gave me my first opportunity performing aerial. I did kind of small atmospheric gigs where I would just be up in a circus hoop while there's a party going on, As one does. Around this time, my parents recently took a vacation on celebrity cruises and they were blown away with the production. The dancers not only danced, but they also did aerial acts. They came home raving about it, so I was so quick to jump on the internet and look at the next audition. It was in New York City. Luckily, my dad being my dad and my number one fan, he didn't even hesitate to book those flights. We used to call him my audition bitch because he always came to auditions with me, which, thanks, Dad. So much support, and I could not have gotten to the place I did in my career without my parents. Now, I did go to that audition. I did very well, got through a few cuts, but at the end of the day, I did get cut. I was 17, so I'm gonna bank that being the reason. But a lot of times, and I'll tell you how many auditions I've been rejected from, it's a reason you don't know. It could be your height, it could be your hair color. They could just not be feeling you that day for no particular reason. But I still do think it's because I was underage, which I don't know what I was thinking. But as the universe has its special little ways, while I was in New York City, that spark hit again. I always have these signals inside of me that just tell me to do something. And when I was there, I knew I had to move there. We went to a couple shows on Broadway and it was just like I couldn't ignore this feeling. I had to move to New York and train and audition for Broadway. And that's just what I did. Now, at the time, I had just turned 18 when I really decided this, and my mom said, you're not just moving to New York City. You have to have a reason. So I found a dance magazine. Back when we had magazines, we'd flip through. Found this dance program for Broadway Dance Center. It was a 5-month internship there. Auditioned, got in, and she went, okay. So packed my bags, and at 18 years old, I moved to New York City for the Broadway Dance Center internship program. Now, before I moved to New York, I told my parents I really wanted to go to the city and struggle. I felt like it was my rite of passage as an artist, and oh my gosh, struggle I did. I'm talking cold showers, 6th-floor walk-ups, mice in my kitchen, cockroach on my legs, walking through snowstorms to get to class. I was in classes multiple times a day. I think we had to take 20 classes a week. Now, as much as I love dancing, don't think I've ignored that little circus spark in me. I found a circus school. There was a trapeze school of New York about 15 blocks south of the dance school I was at. So I would start taking classes all day, walk 15 blocks, train all night at the tent, and then walk all the way back to 90th. I was auditioning for any show I could while I was there, but I also just had this huge eyesight on Cirque du Soleil. So what did I do? I auditioned for Celebrity Cruises and I got a contract. That's right. So the very audition that gave me that inspiration to move to New York is the first big job I landed once I moved to New York. Funny how that works, eh? Celebrity Cruises first took me down to Fort Lauderdale area for rehearsals and something they called boot camp. Now, they did take a handful of their dancers and train them to become aerialists. A few of us did already have aerial experience, myself included. But boot camp was before rehearsals. There was 3 weeks where just my first contract, it was a quad routine. So it was all the 4 female dancers were doing a trapeze act. So we were sent for 3 weeks to train for, I want to say 6 to 8 hours a day with 1 day off a week to condition us and get us ready for this trapeze act. And holy patootie, this might be one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. And I know, still, I'm like, for a cruise ship. Talk about, I mean, we would be bleeding, all of us hands open, wounds on our legs from rope climbs, and they would still make us do our act and condition. It was pushing through injuries. It was sobbing through routines. One time I had to do my trapeze act and I had to do the counts instead of music, and I couldn't. I was crying so hard. It was like 9, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, because we were just in so much pain. We were beat down to be built back up, and oh man, it got us girls close. And then the next 3 weeks, we continued trapeze rehearsal, but then we learned all of our production shows. Once we had that all set, we flew off to Italy and joined our new home for the next 9 months. It was really exciting though, because my itinerary was mainly the Mediterranean. So I was on the coast of Italy, the Greek islands, overnights in Istanbul. I mean, for a 19-year-old, holy moly. After that contract, I was offered another contract, which then they shortened to 6 weeks. So I went to another ship, did a 6-week contract, and they pulled me from that ship to then open their brand new ship, the Reflection. That was an interesting experience, I'll say. I don't want to say it's awesome. I mean, it was definitely it was an experience. Rehearsals were really tough for that one because they were building shows from scratch. It wasn't like we were learning already preset shows. So we would go in and learn a whole number and the next day come in and they'd go, remember that? were changing the whole thing. And that was day after day after day. There was a lot of crying and a lot of stress. Yeah, it was very difficult. Then when we got on the ship, it was still in dry dock. So they were still finishing building the ship. I mean, I'd go into the atrium and there'd be no staircase. And then 2 days later, you'd walk through and there was a staircase. Carpets being rolled out. That was a really fun thing to see. I mean, getting to see a cruise ship being built. But we were so behind on our production shows. We spent the entirety of the day in the theater trying to get these shows complete. During this time, I was aerial captain again, so I got to schedule all of our trainings. I got to bring on my own aerial apparatuses, mainly my hoop. I got to hang it a couple times a week and just get that extra aerial training. So during this whole time, I'm still chipping away at my circus training and getting stronger, getting better. Now, it's very standard, kind of stereotypical on cruise ships that people always go, oh, it's my last contract. It's a very comfortable, great career for a dancer, but it can be hard to break out when you're getting paid well, everything's handed to you, and then another contract's handed. But this is about the time I promised myself, no matter what, I was not going to take another contract. I knew I had to get off this ship because I just had that feeling of there's more. I need to do more. I kept my promise, and after that contract was over, I packed my bags and moved back to New York City with no job, no contract, just faith and trust, because that's what you got to do sometimes in this business. I was able to save quite a pretty penny doing a couple cruise contracts. So I had a cushion which allowed me to rent a room and pay for trainings and, continue auditioning as I got back to New York. I spent about 3 months in New York City. During that time, I'd go take dance classes, train at the circus school, and gig and audition as much as I could. I landed a gig at a burlesque club doing my aerial act, and I would go there quite a few times I performed. That was an interesting experience because it was very unorganized. A lot of drugs involved with people who manage clubs. Not saying they were, it was a lot of fun though. That was kind of my first look into true burlesque performing, which comes back around later in my story. In my handful of many auditions during that time, I auditioned for the national tour of Rock of Ages and booked it! I was so excited. I freaking booked a national tour of my favorite show, by the way. I love Broadway and show tunes, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of shows I wouldn't want to be stuck doing, and Rock of Ages was my number one. I mean, hello! I got a little break to fly back home and see my family before I was off on this tour. But when I came back to New York, it was over the holidays that we had to rehearse. So I was spending, Christmas Eve in rehearsals. Christmas morning, I spent alone. I went to Rockefeller Plaza by myself and looked at the tree. New Year's Eve, we had rehearsals. And then just after the new year, we hit the road and all flew to Florida, where we opened in Gainesville. Now, as much as I loved doing this show, this tour was one for the books. Even everyone on that tour that had done multiple tours said this was one of the roughest schedules they've ever had. It was the third year of a show going out, so a lot of the longer sit-downs at theaters they've done in the first 2 years didn't want to rebook them. So we got stuck with one-nighters galore. That meant every single morning we were on the tour bus for hours. We'd get dropped off at a little motel, drive over to a theater, do sound check, do everything we need to do, get ready, do the show, bust back to our hotel, and the next morning, as early as 4 or 5 in the morning, our bus call to get back on the bus and drive to a new city. I also was psychotic at that time, so I was doing 1 to 2 shows of a very intense cardio show, I might add, and then I was going to the gym for an hour and a half in the morning doing some of the hardest workouts I've ever done. I literally was psychotic. Talk about don't know how I did it. Pre-workout, a lot of pre-workout, yeah. My poor heart. Actually, I could add in here, in the psycho, this will be another video. I'm going to get into this because it's a big part of my past and it's a big dark shadow of a lot of performers or eating disorders. So I was battling a lot of eating disorders through my New York cruise ships and this national tour time. I was throwing up a lot in New York, kind of starving myself on ships, and then really honing in. I was on a bodybuilding workout during this time, but I really took it too far and kind of was just living off of oatmeal and protein powder. Not great. Love eating now. It's a journey that I got myself to. A lot of self-love that you have to give yourself and walls to break down. But anyone struggling out there, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you more about it. Rock of Ages was about a 9-month tour. It was all in the US, but then we kind of got this reward of a month booked in Singapore at the end. We got a lot of days off there, so it was just this nice honestly hard-earned vacation in a really cool country. During that time, I loved doing the show, and I knew I could continue trying to book other national tours, but again, this thing inside of me I missed the circus and being in the air so much. It was after this tour that I decided I have to go full throttle that route. So, only one place to do that: Las Vegas. I had a couple weeks before then, I think at the end of my tour, I had put together a demo reel of my aerial skills and sent that in for an audition for Cirque du Soleil, and I got invited to an audition. I was so stressed, but it was that next trip to Vegas where I was going to audition for Cirque du Soleil that I found an apartment and signed a lease. I'm telling you, a lot of leaps of faith in this career, a lot of leaps of faith, but you gotta believe in yourself. This is what I'd been working for since I was 17, kind of in that quiet shadow of my dance career. And I honestly never thought I'd be good enough for Cirque du Soleil. That was kind of the story I told myself for a very long time. Like, oh, that would be a dream. When I was kind of wanting to do Cirque in New York, I was looking at trying to get into a dancer role in Cirque because I was more confident with my dancing skills, as I've done it my whole life. The aerialists I had seen though growing up, they were in a different universe, category, world, realm to me. I just never thought that I could get there. And so getting this invite to the audition was this kind of like, holy shit, they think just off my video that I'm good enough. My audition was in the Zarkana Theater, which no longer exists. It was at the Aria Hotel and Casino. So everyone that got invited went into the theater, and one at a time, we went up on stage and did our solo act in front of everybody and the panel of judges or whoever was casting. Talk about intimidating. Like, I was already nervous enough to be doing my act in front of the casting for Cirque, let alone on this giant Cirque du Soleil stage, let alone in front of everyone else who's also auditioning. Like, you can just feel, I was going to say the judgment, but honestly, in the circus, the support and love is beyond. I mean, no offense, dancers, but you're kind of mean and cutthroat. Not in the circus. Everyone is so supportive, and that just drew me to it more and more as the years went on. So it was finally my turn. I hooked up my hoop, did my act. I'll post that same act later. I have a video of me doing my act in training a week before that audition, so I'll give you a little sneak peek. After everyone had done their act, they made a cut. So they invited the ones that made it to the next round to meet them at a gym the following day. So the next morning, we all show up at this gymnastics gym, and this is when the real fun begins. They put us through a lot of different exercises and kind of group works. We just had to show that we can be in the moment and really perform. Now, you guessed it, there's a lot of strength involved in Cirque, and that was a huge part of this audition. We had to do things like climb rope without our legs. We had to do this one exercise that was like 10 pull-ups into 10 burpees into 10 leg ups, like one right after the other, to show not only strength but endurance too, because being in a Cirque show, it's a lot of endurance. So after all of these, I think they did one cut somewhere in the middle of the day, did some more exercises, did flexibility testing. Those who got into the database were given a paper that said, "Congrats, I was one of them." Oh my gosh, that feeling of being good enough, that's something I've always kind of struggled with and still work through today, is being good enough. And that moment, oh wow, did I just prove myself wrong. Gelsey, you were good enough. You are good enough. And you know what? You watching, you're good enough too. Oh, this is not a self-help channel. I just, it got inspired to share the love. Yeah. Now, I wish I could say that I was done after those 2 days, but I had one more audition booked the following day. This was for a company called Cirque Eloise. Cirque du Soleil just bought them, so they were kind of a little boutique company up in Montreal, and they were putting on this giant show. So the next day, I went to a studio, did their full day audition, and that involved, again, performing my hoop act, some strength exercises, and then some improv and dance routines. After all this, I think it was the next day I went to that apartment I told you about, signed my lease, and drove home to California and told my parents, I'm packing up to move to Vegas. They're like, what? So over that next few weeks, again, waited, I got a contract offer from Cirque Eloise for their new show. So that was going to take me to Montreal for a creation and then to France for 2 years. So I had about 9 months left in Vegas where I trained every day. I mean, I was in the gym 6 hours a day, again, 6 to 7 days a week sometimes. I will say there were some days I would go in and just like lie down. I was so tired and training so much, but it was such a fun time because I really got to know the circus community in Vegas and became really good friends with a lot of people who I would later get to work with. Also during that time, I got in with a couple companies where I got to gig quite a bit. So I was doing really cool performances at nightclubs for corporate big award ceremonies. One time I got to do a private concert with The Weeknd as he sang the 50 Shades of Grey song. It was me and another girl right above him in basically no clothing and kind of ropey bondage looks. And I remember at the time I was like, ugh, it was like 1 a.m. and I was like, this is way too late for acrobatics. But then I looked down and I was like, dude, Gels, this is dope. Like, you're in the air right above The Weeknd's head as he's singing live. Clock this. Cool. I also got the opportunity to be a part of the show Fantasy that's at the Luxor Casino. It is a topless show. It was a lot of fun. They have a Silks act that I got hired to do, but they also were like, hey, you want to dance? And I was like, yes, I do. So I really loved my time there. It was a lot of fun. If you're ever in Vegas, definitely check that show out. Fun, sexy. So after that time in Vegas, I got a storage unit, packed up my apartment, packed 2 suitcases, and flew to Montreal. That was another one of those experiences that was amazing, but also very difficult. Are you seeing a theme that a lot of these things are really tough to go through? In the moment, you just like push through and work your ass off. But now when I look back, I'm like, gosh, I'm tired thinking about it. But this was a 5-month creation of a brand new show. We got to spend a lot of the time at Cirque du Soleil's headquarters because they have these giant kind of almost warehouse rooms that you could build the tour's stages there that will then, get on the road. So you can create in that space. It was a lot of fun to be there. Another very surreal experience, but this was a tough creation. With any creation of a show, it is a lot of fatigue and frustration, just as much as it is exciting and motivating. You're going in learning things, and the next day they go, oh, everything we taught you yesterday, scratch that, we're going to teach you something else to it. And then a week later they say, you remember that original version? Well, let's try that again. And your brain, it's a very stimulating overload of information, and you're having to remember choreography, re-remember, forget, change. So you definitely have to be adaptive and go with the flow for these kind of experiences. I was hired as an aerialist, but I also did dance quite a bit. So I was there at 8 a.m., I would say, up in the air at 8 a.m., and we'd be trying new drops and tricks and trying to put this act together. And I would stay as late as 5 or 6, depending on the day, learning different cues and dance routines and again, changing it. Unfortunately, I did get a bit of an overuse injury during this time because we were just training so much, and me being me, I was overtraining on the side. I got some kind of weird like double bicep forearm cramp where I couldn't straighten my arms. So that took me about a month after to recover, which comes to the story of the ending of this contract. We did all sign 2-year contracts with this show, but literally the week before we were supposed to fly to Luxembourg to do our final tech runs and do our soft opening, the producers basically ghosted the show, is what we are told at this point. It's kind of not known what happened. This does not happen much in this world, but it happened to us. So we did 5 months of this creation. We're ready to go tour for 2 years, and it never left Montreal. That was a weird moment in my career because I had no jobs lined up. I had just packed up my home in Vegas into a storage unit. I didn't really know what to do. And then it was back to Hustle Town. I put together a brand new aerial reel and pushed it out everywhere on social media, the internet. Instagram wasn't really a thing yet, so Facebook was on, the old Facebook. Now, this is the kind of thing that happens if you just push through and connect and network. The universe lines up things the way they're supposed to happen. I posted my aerial reel. I remember I was in Amsterdam and I had posted that reel, and my sister reposted it to share to get more people to see it. She was in Hawaii at this time doing a show, and she walks in and her director goes, Giselle, whose aerial reel did you post? She goes, oh, that's my sister. He goes, well, I also direct a show that tours Germany, and it starts in 3 weeks, and we're looking for an aerialist. We still haven't booked one. I want her, have her email me. And just like that, next thing I knew, I was signing a contract for a 5-month tour in Germany with an ice skating show. Like, plot twist, this is just a side note, even if you're not in the entertainment world, anything you do, it's just like create and push it out there. Send the emails, make the LinkedIn account, make the calls. Like, you never know where it's gonna lead, but you actually just have to put it out there for it to get in someone's lap. And it does get in someone's lap. I mean, it did for me. Before I knew it, I was unpacking my 2 suitcases that were supposed to take me on tour to France and repacking them to go to Germany for 5 months. This was a really different experience for me because I got to look inside the ice skating world. The show I booked was Holiday on Ice. You might know it in the States, but it's a really, really big deal in Europe. It's kind of like the way here the Rockettes are so iconic and traditional. That's Holiday on Ice there. So Utrecht is a little city in Holland, about 45 minutes outside of Amsterdam. That's where our rehearsals were. The skaters went every day in this big warehouse with a big slab of ice. I was freezing. Yeah, my blood was not used to the ice. And on the side, I got to hang my silks and work out my silks act. This was fun because it was not really a set piece. I got a set piece of music and I knew that I had to create my act that interworked with one ice skater who skated me around, spun me, pushed me, you name it. But I really had the freedom to create something new. It was just a little intimidating, but sometimes you gotta be pushed and you'll surprise yourself. The first time I did any of my really big drops though in the warehouse, because it was so cold, I remember thinking I was gonna have to quit. Like, I did this one huge drop and it just felt like 1,000 knives went in my head because the impact with that temperature, I literally thought I was gonna have to quit that day, but I adapted to it within the week. It was just something I had to acclimate to. I also have this act on my YouTube, so if you want to check it out, it's a really fun, unique act incorporating the ice skater and me in the air. As much fun as it was touring Germany during Christmas time, I mean, the markets there during Christmas, oh, you have to check it out during the holiday season. I'm just being casual. Just casually go to Germany. Hey, why not? It was difficult for me because I was the only circus artist on this tour. So I loved all the ice skaters, but when you're kind of singled out that way, you do get lonely. I had one act during the show, of like a 2-hour show, so it was a lot of alone time in these big arenas, kind of in the dark on cement by myself. They would hang points in the back that I could rig my silks to train and practice, but it was hard finding the motivation in that kind of an atmosphere. But don't worry, I did. I knew I had to get my conditioning back up to where it was when I was in Vegas, so that when I went back to Vegas after this tour, I was prepped and ready to get hired for hopefully the next gig. I will make a quick side note here for anyone that knows aerial equipment. So I was on the silks, those are the fabrics on this tour. I initially auditioned for Cirque with my hoop act, the metal hoop that hangs in the air. But what I really had my eye on was something called straps, aerial straps. And the reason I wanted to do that is because there was this special little act at the Beatles Love Show that inspired me when I was 15 that I really wanted to do. Again, I remember thinking, there's no way I'll ever get to that level. But I, still dreamed and hoped. So when I was in Vegas before I left for Montreal, I started taking privates with coaches on straps. And then while I was in Montreal, there was a straps couple in our show. I would go to all the rehearsals and was hoping on the tour to be their backup so I could train more and more on the straps. So now that I'm on this tour, I started doing a lot of conditioning that was relevant to that because I just had to be good at this apparatus in my head. I had to. And I guess there's a reason for it. Once my tour in Germany was done, I headed back to Las Vegas, found an apartment, unpacked my storage unit, and got back to my old Vegas life, which was training every day, all day in the gym. It was really good to see all my friends and kind of just get back to that routine. I also got into the show Zombie Burlesque, which was so much fun. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a burlesque show that's zombies, but it's a really funny, well-done show. Now, at this time, I'm also continuing my straps training. I have a coach. I'm only training on straps. And then my best friend at the time was in the Beatles Love Show, which I was like, oh my God, you're in love. And he told me that the girl who was the strap solo was leaving and that position was opening. Oh my God, I wanted to die. I was like, I'm not ready. I need more time to get these skills. He pushed and pushed and pushed me to write the email to casting and to the director to say, hey, I'm interested. So even though I didn't feel ready, I did. Casting wrote back, said, great, we didn't know you'd be interested. Send in a video of you doing ABC. I basically had to kind of put together a little routine and then send specific strength moves in a video. Sent that in, and then got an invite back to go in person to the theater and do some stuff in front of the coach and the artistic director. I do want to make a little side note here that the artistic director at the time was who my artistic director was in Montreal for the whole creation. He was covering the normal director's job while she was on maternity leave. Like, oh my gosh, this man already knows what I do and knows my work, loves my work. I mean, what are the chances? Obviously high, right? So I went in person, did some strength moves for the coach, different elements and tricks on the straps, and then had to go do a little acting segment with the director. And then I left the theater, a nervous wreck. Like, I had to sit and wait for about 2 weeks until I got a message from the director saying, "You're about to have a very good fall." That's when the contract would start. Officially, casting called me, I think, the next day and gave me the contract offer for the strap solo at the Beatles Love Show, the role of Julia, which was my ultimate dream role. Like, when I was 15 and saw the show, I saw that act and wanted it so bad, but just never thought I would be at that level to get it. Again, one of those pinch me now and, oh my gosh, Gelsey, you're good enough. I will say, though, that I did battle that feeling and story the first few months. I did have a couple shows that I just felt like I wasn't good enough in the shows, and I would definitely have some good cries in the car. But I think that's anyone starting any new job. It's a little intimidating, and you just have to get over that hump of convincing yourself you're all good. You're deserving and worthy of being here. I stayed at the Beatles Love Show for 3 years, 3 amazing years. I met some of the most incredible people and got to perform in front of a handful of celebrities. I can't express, it's still such a dream. Like, even now I'm like, did I really do that? I also have a video here explaining my day-to-day life while I was in Cirque du Soleil if you're interested in that. Now, even though this was my dream job, I started to get complacent about 2 years in. A bit bored, bit depressed. I was just missing that gusto, motivation, fire that I'd always had. Then I realized I had a new dream I wanted to work for. When I was back in Singapore with Rock of Ages, I got to go to the Universal Studios there, and they had a live action stunt show, Waterworld. They also have that in California, but it kind of put that idea in my mind of being a stunt woman. I was like, well, this is cool. So now fast forward, that started getting a little bit bigger, brighter, main focus of what I wanted next. So my last year at Love, I was training different martial arts, wushu, Krav Maga, Kali, you name it. Just trying to prepare myself best for the LA stunt world. I wrapped up my final month at Love. It was in October, and I just soaked in every moment, but I was so excited to get back to California and get into the film industry. I moved in with my parents because I didn't know where I wanted to live yet, put my apartment back in a storage unit, and I drove to LA almost every day from Riverside, which, if you're not from California, that's about a 2-hour commute that I was doing at 4:30 in the morning to make a 6 a.m. class because I'm crazy. I also was taking different privates with people for martial arts, weapon work, wire work, you name it. I was going, training, and then the pandemic happened and COVID hit, and I was stuck at home for ever, it felt like. It was kind of crazy, but thank goodness I didn't have an apartment, and this gave me time to just go in my parents' backyard and keep doing what I do, train. I trained martial arts every day, and I was ready to go when the film industry opened back up. And I also got a little creative with videos and YouTube. I was bored and didn't want to just sit around, so I made a couple fun videos with my dad, and we went a bit viral. They're also still here on my YouTube channel if you want to check them out, just for a good little giggle. When everything started opening back up, my first job I booked was at Disneyland, back at my starting professional job, opening a new stunt show there. Unfortunately, I did suffer a couple really bad injuries that ended my stunt career quite abruptly. This was a very difficult time for me and a big pill to swallow. It took me, still dealing with some stuff, but you gotta roll with the punches, literally. And that brings me to now. I've kind of come to a point in my career which I'm thinking, well, what next? And with all my experience and knowledge, I thought, what better way than to share my stories and experiences with all of you here on YouTube? So here we are. I will be going further into each of these different experiences I had in their own videos, so definitely keep a lookout. Again, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss those. I hope you liked today's video and can't wait to see you for more.